All right, so buckle up, everybody. Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
You know how this works. We take a fascinating topic and really get into it. Today, we're talking about Global Capability Centers, GCCs,
Catchy acronym.
right? But really important. These are those global branches that multinational companies set up. They're handling all sorts of things, IT, finance, even research and operations, you name it.
Yeah. And they are becoming more and more important in today's business world.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. As these GCCs gain influence, they also face a whole new level of scrutiny.
Making sure they're playing by the rules.
Exactly. And that's where this deep dive comes in. We're going to explore the world of GCC compliance. Specifically, we're using a recent article, Will GCCs Face Compliance Challenges in the Future? As our roadmap. Spoiler alert, I think we already know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think the title kind of gives it away.
Right. But it's not just about avoiding penalties. It's about building trust, attracting top talent, and ultimately making sure these GCCs succeed in the long run.
No question about it, compliance is a big deal.
So let's get into it. The article lays out a rapidly evolving compliance landscape. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges GCCs are wrestling with these days?
Well, I'd say three really jump out. First up, data privacy and protection, with all the new regulations like GDPR.
Yeah, that one's a game changer.
It definitely is. And then you've got the ever-present threat of cybersecurity risks, which is only becoming more intense with the shift to remote work.
Makes sense. More devices, more networks, more opportunities for things to go wrong.
Precisely. And then to top it all off, you've got this whole tangled web of global regulations.
Oh yeah, trying to keep up with all those different requirements across different countries. Must be a logistical nightmare.
It can be, that's for sure.
Okay, so let's break these down a bit, starting with data privacy. Why is GDPR such a big deal for GCCs in particular?
Well, because it sets a really high standard for data protection. And it's not just limited to Europe either.
Right, it has a global reach.
Exactly. So let's say you have a GCC in India handling personal data from European customers.
Okay, so not even based in the EU.
Right. But they are still bound by GDPR regulations. And if they mess up, let's say they don't get proper consent for how they use that data.
Ooh, that's not good.
It's not. They could end up facing huge fines, not to mention damage to their reputation.
So it's really about understanding the far-reaching implications of these regulations. It's not just about following local laws.
Exactly.
Okay, what about cybersecurity? You mentioned GCCs being especially vulnerable. Why is that?
Well, think about what they do. GCCs are often right at the heart of digital transformation initiatives for their parent companies. So they're dealing with a lot of really sensitive information.
Financial data, intellectual property, you name it.
Exactly. And that makes them prime targets for cybercriminals.
And like we were saying before, with the rise of remote work, there are just more points of entry for those criminals to exploit.
More devices, more networks, it's a much bigger attack surface to secure. And the stakes, well, they just keep getting higher.
No doubt about it. Okay, let's talk about that last challenge, juggling global regulations. Can you give us a real-world example of how these variations can create problems for GCCs?
Sure, let's take the EU's GDPR and California's CCPA. Both focus on data privacy, right?
Right.
But they approach it differently. GDPR really stresses user consent and data minimization, whereas CCPA is more about consumer rights and transparency.
Subtle but important differences.
Exactly. So now imagine a GCC that has operations in both the EU and California.
They've got to comply with both sets of regulations.
Right. And that could mean having different data handling procedures, different consent mechanisms, different reporting requirements, all sorts of things. It can get very messy very quickly.
Sounds like a recipe for headaches.
You could say that.
It really seems like compliance isn't just a box to check. It's woven into the very fabric of how a GCC operates.
100%. It's a way of life.
So how do they actually do it? How do they manage all of this? The article we're looking at mentions some recommendations from NASSCOM,
NASSCOM.
the National Association of Software and Service Companies.
Right, right.
Any thoughts on their advice?
Yeah, I think they make some really important points. First and foremost, they emphasize proactive risk management.
What exactly does that mean?
It means identifying potential compliance issues before they turn into major disasters.
Kind of like getting regular checkups at the doctor's office.
Exactly. You catch those small problems early on so they don't turn into big ones down the road.
Prevention is key.
Absolutely.
What other key strategies does NASSCOM recommend?
Well, unsurprisingly, they really hammer home the importance of robust cybersecurity measures.
Which is probably more crucial now than ever, given everything we've been talking about.
No question. And it's not just about the basics either.
Mm,
We're talking about firewalls and antivirus software, sure, but also things like sophisticated threat detection systems.
things to actively search out and stop attacks.
Exactly. And penetration testing to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys do. And of course, a solid incident response plan so they can minimize the damage if a breach does occur. GCCs just can't afford to be complacent about cybersecurity.
Makes sense. It's like having a good security system in place for your home. You hope you never need it, but you're sure glad you have it if something happens.
A good analogy.
I was also thinking technology itself could be a really useful tool for GCCs trying to navigate this whole web of compliance rules.
Absolutely. Embracing the right technology can be transformative. Think about tools that automate data mapping and compliance reporting, or AI-powered systems that can spot suspicious activity and prevent data breaches.
So tech can help streamline things and reduce the risk of human error.
Exactly.
It's like having a super efficient assistant to handle all the complicated details.
I like that. It's all about making compliance more manageable.
Makes sense. But even with the best tech in the world, it's still people who are making the decisions and carrying out the actions. So the human factor can't be ignored, right?
You're absolutely right. NASSCOM is spot on when they highlight the need for a strong culture of compliance within GCCs.
What does that look like in practice?
It means training employees on the relevant regulations, putting clear policies and procedures in place. It's about creating an environment where everyone understands that compliance is everyone's responsibility. It has to be more than just ticking boxes. It needs to be baked into the way the organization thinks and acts.
So it's an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time fix.
Exactly.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to step back for a second and ask, why should our listeners care about all of this? Some of them might not be directly involved in GCCs. So what's the takeaway for them?
That's a great question. And here's the simple truth. When a GCC messes up, when they mishandle data or suffer a security breach, it has ripple effects that can be felt across the entire global economy. It erodes trust in businesses, it impacts consumer confidence, and in some cases, it can even disrupt critical services.
So it's really in everyone's best interest of these GCCs to get compliance right.
It really is. And keep in mind, the compliance landscape is only going to get more complex as technology continues to evolve at such a breakneck pace.
Which brings me to a final thought for our listeners to chew on. What new compliance challenges might be waiting just around the corner for GCCs? It's something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.